I'm Amanda, and this is Not Your Granny's Quilt Show. Welcome to today's episode. I am so excited for our guest today. I have Amber of Alderwood Studio on the show today. I know, huge deal. I even told her how much I was kind of fangirling because I've been nervous to ask her to be on the show, but of course she said yes because she's like such a cool person. If you don't know her, Amber has a pattern writing course that is a great way for you to jump into learning how to write your own quilt patterns if you are interested. Her course has already started for this year. So if you are interested in taking it, she has like a mini intro course that's kind of like an overview of the main pattern writing course that you can kind of do to check it out. Otherwise, she does it around the early part of the year. So watch out for it next year. Otherwise, she has a subscription box, a Modern Maker membership where you can get patterns, mini quilts or wall hangings or pillows, like small projects that are easy to dive into. And she is one of Riley Blake's newest designers. So in the fall of this year, 2024, she will have her first line of fabric called Garden Dreams coming out. So if you are a fan, then I'm going to be doing it, but you should petition your local quilt shop to carry her fabric and get it on order so that we can see her beautiful fabric on shelves. And in the meantime of you checking out all of her fun stuff, you can listen to our episode and learn all about Amber. Did you know there is new merch in the merch shop? Well, there is. I'm so excited. I've designed a couple new mugs. There's some more t-shirts, some sweatshirts and hoodies, and I just love making stuff for you guys. So head to nygqs.printify.me. The link is in the description down below so that you can check out all the cool merch that we have in the shop. And I love taking suggestions. So if you have a cool idea or something that you could see being on some merch for Not Your Granny's Quilt Show, send me a message. I'd love to hear it. Also, we're still working towards our 55-star reviews on Apple Podcasts. So if you're listening and you're in Apple Podcasts right now, please pause and go do a 5-star review. Once we hit 50, I'm going to do a huge giveaway. That's Apple Podcasts. Go to the show, leave a 5-star review, and help us reach 50. That way we can launch the giveaway. Now, on to the show. Welcome to the show, Amber. Thank you so much for making time in your busy schedule to be here. I know you are chock full of fun things coming up, so thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's fun to be here.
Yeah, I honestly, I have to confess, I've been a little nervous to ask you to be on the show because you're like kind of a big deal. And so I just had to like carve out a second for my fangirl appreciation because I know a lot of people I've talked to have taken your courses and love you to the moon. So this is like such a cool experience for me and hopefully for the quilters out there who know you and love you. So
That's so nice of you to say. That's so sweet. I'm not a big deal, as my children would tell you.
they don't count.
There's nothing more humbling than, spending your time with a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But thank you. It always means a lot to hear that from my students. I always try to make sure that they're well supported and happy and get everything they need. So that's good to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I've heard nothing but good things. So it's really cool. But before we get into any of that, let's start at the beginning of where you learned to sew or where quilting came into your life, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. So my beginning to sew story is kind of I don't know, I think it's funny. When I was a kid, I would go stay with my maternal grandmother once a year for a week in the summer. And I don't even remember how old I was when we started doing this, but I was quite young, like young enough to keep poking myself on accident. But one year when I was there, my grandma got out a bunch of like her old clothes and all of this sewing stuff. She didn't have a sewing machine, but she had like this big hutch, and in it she had all kinds of random stuff. And she had like big jars of buttons and needles and thread and all of that. And so one year we just spent the week chopping up her clothes and sewing them back together, Frankenstein style, like, get an arm from here, get an arm from here.
Yeah.
Add a little skirt from here. And it was a blast. I loved it. And I very proudly brought home the thing that I made for my mom and showed it to her. And I'm sure she was like, oh, very nice. I was like, yeah, put it on.
Yeah,
So,
you're like, wear it, mom.
yep, and she wore it. So that was really where the sewing got started. And I loved it. I thought it was the funnest thing ever. And I think it actually, like, starting that way gave me a really good appreciation for like reusing materials and things like that, which I don't do as much as I would like to now, since a lot of times I'm working with specific fabric lines and things like that. But there are so many textiles out there in the world, and it's just nice to be able to give some of them kind of a second life, So I've always loved to try to incorporate that where I can. And then my other grandmother is the one who taught me to use a sewing machine, and it was kind of the opposite situation. I had my mom's mom who gave me old clothes to sew together, and then I had my dad's mom who was extremely glamorous, like the fanciest person ever. I don't know, it was so exciting as a little kid.
Yeah.
She was part of this like organization, and they'd have these big like fancy parties and events and all of these things. And so she had these like formals, like a massive closet full of just formal gowns, and she would make some of them. Some of them she had made, some of them she made herself, or she'd alter, things like that. And so I got to see her then working on those, and she had, just like drawers full of like crazy beaded trim and applique stuff and ribbons and just like wild stuff, rhinestones everywhere, hot pink everywhere, just like totally wild. So it was really fun to kind of like have these two very different influences when I was learning to sew. And she would always give me leftover fabric of whatever she was working on. So, and I still have a lot of it in one of these drawers back here. I don't know what I'm ever going to do with it, but I have like 30, 40-year-old bundles of like satin and hot pink taffeta, and like, what am I going to do with this? I don't know, but it's just so fun to have on hand.
Yeah, one day inspiration will strike and you'll figure something out. But
yeah, I mean, I have little kids, they'll get bigger. Maybe one day we'll make something crazy for them.
Yeah.
But I didn't really start quilting actually until I was a teenager. And I did it very poorly. I'm kind of one of those people that, like, my husband maybe used to love this about me and not so much now. I'll get an idea in my head and I'm like, I think I'm going to do this thing. And he'll be like, okay, yeah. I'm like, so stand up. We're going now to do this thing. I'm not talking about like in a month. I'm talking about like right this second.
Like immediately.
Yes. I'm like, I have an idea. Let's do it. For better or worse.
Right.
That's how I started quilting. I think like 15. I don't remember what prompted it, but one day I was like, I'm going to make a quilt. And my mom was like, you know how to make a quilt? And I was like, no, but I have a sewing machine. Like, how hard can it be? Cut stuff up and sew it back together. And so I went to Joann's and I picked out a whole bunch of like low volume grandma prints. Very into it. It was very like, cottagey, which of course is back in now. So
of course.
Something. I did not have a rotary cutter or anything like that. I went home and carefully cut all this fabric up into little squares with scissors, and then I sewed it all together. Didn't have an iron, didn't press, didn't know what a real seam allowance was. I just kind of did it, and eventually I had a giant patchwork quilt. And instead of sandwiching it and quilting it and binding it, I put it together like a pillowcase or like a pillow with like I basically did it like that, sewed around the edges and then flipped it inside out. And I was like, done, did it.
Yeah.
So that quilt still exists. it's not in great shape since it wasn't quilted.
Yeah.
I think I tied it in like 3 spots with a piece of yarn I found. So I did a little bit, but I actually recently cut along the edges and took it apart. The bag was really disgusting inside, but I am going to sometime when I find the time, I'm going to actually quilt it for real and rebind it and then turn it into a real quilt.
An actual quilt.
20 years later.
Yeah. It's like Pinocchio. One day you'll be a real boy.
Yeah, one day you'll be a real quilt, not something falling apart and kind of questionable.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, and it's like you just see these things, you're like, oh, I can make that. And without having any real like
Yeah.
knowledge of how, but you had like the basics, you had the know-how to like cut things apart.
Yeah. I knew how to use a sewing machine, knew how to use
Right. Yeah. There's like so many times where like I didn't really sew until later either. I mean, my mom taught me how to use her sewing machine. My anxiety kept me from like really digging into it because I was too scared to break her machine or like ruin stuff. So I didn't do a lot of sewing, but the times I did, I was like, I can make a bag. I can figure this out. Or I would like randomly just like my thing in high school was to have her uh like we would cut the inseam out of jeans because I'd, just have jeans that were falling apart and fill the front and back, like make it a skirt with like
Yeah.
I was obsessed with batiks at the time. And so I would have her fill it with batik fabric.
That
And so
was
I
a thing. That was a thing for a while.
it was.
Yeah.
Um and so yeah, hello early 2000s. But
Uh-huh.
but so that was like, I didn't do the sewing necessarily. I had her do it because I for that, but I would make little bags here and there, just like try to figure stuff out. And I think that's why I wasn't too hesitant to start. Well, I was. My friends had to literally force me to sit down and learn how to make a quilt to get me to do it. But once I figured it out, I was like, oh, I can do this.
Yeah. Yeah. I've always found, I don't know, I didn't even really understand this about myself until like very recently, which is kind of embarrassing and stupid. But
Mm.
I am definitely like a hands-on learning style person. Like I'd
Mm-hmm.
like to think I can sit and still and watch someone else do something, but I just don't want to. I just want to do it and figure it out and mess up a bunch and then I'll know.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, I think that makes a lot of people anxious
Mm-hmm.
for good reason because it's a very error prone way of doing things.
Yeah.
It almost always comes back to bite me. There's always swearing, there's always frustration. I'm always like, man, if I had just spent, 10 minutes learning about this first instead of just doing it,
Yeah.
this would have gone better. But that's actually part of why I like teaching too, because I know a lot of people are visual learners and like to kind of see how something is working before they try to do it. And I like being able to kind of cut through some of the frustrating trial and error that happens when you just dive into something. I mean, if people love to just dive into something, that's awesome. But the people who don't want to try to persist through hours of frustration,
Yeah.
who does? It's not the fun part. I like
Right.
being able to kind of cut that part out of the creative process because, it should be
Mm-hmm.
fun. It should be positive, especially since so many of us don't have a lot of time.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So after making that first quilt, how long was it until you made your second quilt
Oh,
or
that's
your
a good
next one?
question. Well, if you had asked me this like a month ago, I would have said years and years and years, but I was just at my parents' house a little bit ago and I saw my mom was on her like 400th phase of cleaning out their attic. Like it's one of
Oh.
those things where, once a year she's like, I'm purging everything. And then
Mm-hmm.
it happens again the next year.
Yeah.
Um, but I saw this like calico little small patchwork thing sitting out. And I was like, what is that? She said, you made that. I was like, no, I didn't. She's like, yeah, you did that when you were a teenager. So I have zero memory of that. She said there
Mm.
are several of them. Apparently, I kept making things. I don't know. No memory of that. The next quilt I remember making was once I had like friends that started having babies or getting
Mm-hmm.
married. So maybe in my early 20s, I had a lot of friends that were older than me that I met through work and things like that. And so in my early 20s, I started making more quilts for people like that. And I made like one Elizabeth Hartman quilt that I used a pattern for,
Mm.
but for the most part, I just made my own thing.
Yeah.
Again, for better or worse.
Yeah.
Trial and error. There are plenty. I learned a lot about quilt design the hard way,
Hmm.
by making a lot of mistakes and not understanding the math at first and things like that. So I made several quilts just for friends, for people. Whenever there was some kind of event, I would typically make them. But I didn't make them like all the time. It wasn't like an obsessive, like every spare minute I'm doing this. It was more like for when someone had a reason for one.
Yeah.
And gosh, I'm trying to even think when I started really doing it more frequently. I'm guessing it was, geez, probably a little bit, a couple years before my son was born, maybe my first was born.
Hmm.
I think I started quilting a bit more. I had more friends having babies. I,
Yeah.
was paying more attention to fabric lines I liked and starting to get more excited about it. So I had maybe made like a few quilts a year before that. And then I started making more and more.
Yeah.
And gosh, it's hard to remember, but I'm pretty sure it was when my son, yeah, when my son was a baby, I had made this one specific, really simple quilt that was fun to make, but really easy to put together. And a friend of mine who worked at like a crafting magazine or something was like, "Have you ever thought about writing a pattern?" And
Mm.
I was like, "No, I have not." And then
Hmm.
I was like, "That doesn't sound fun. I don't want to do that." But then the more I thought about it, the more I was like, "Oh, I could do that. Maybe I could do that." And
Yeah.
so I started buying patterns to better understand, how people write them, what people looked
Yeah.
for, things like that. So I
Mhm.
started making more quilts from patterns so I could better understand how they're written,
Yeah.
how people use patterns, all of that. I didn't feel like I needed to be writing patterns if I didn't fully understand how they were written and how people were using them. So
Yeah.
I picked up some patterns. I started making quilts from patterns, learned a lot about how they come together, what a well-written pattern looks like, what frustrates people who are newer to reading patterns, even if I wasn't new to quilting. Um, and so that was a really kind of valuable chunk of time, I think, that I spent, even though I really wanted to just dive into writing them. I was like, I'm going to do some research first. So
Yeah.
once I went through that process for a little while, I felt a lot more confident about being able to produce my own. And so I started trying to write a pattern.
Hmm.
It was much harder than I expected for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
It's like every step of the process, from like creating the diagrams to doing the math to how you're laying it out and what software to use and where different steps go and like how to
Hmm.
optimize construction. It's like very different making a quilt for yourself and writing down the correct steps for other people to follow, because there's so many different ways to assemble everything, right? And
Hmm.
trying to optimize like the ability of someone to actually make it and the best construction methods and the best use of fabric and all of these different things was just much more complicated than I expected.
Yeah.
But I loved doing it. It was really fun. I released my first pattern for free, and then I immediately started working on the next one, which was a pretty straightforward, simple one. And
Hmm.
um, it was just so fun to start actually writing down some of the ideas I had. And I started very simple. Like I started with some pretty basic designs that I wasn't that excited about, but I wanted to make sure that I was doing it right,
Yeah. Yeah.
doing it correctly and
For sure.
making something people could actually follow. So
Yeah.
um, it was a really, really fun, quick decision that changed my life a lot.
Yeah. I was gonna say it's like 0 to 60 in 2 seconds.
Yeah. I mean, when I started doing this, I was working as a software engineer.
Oh.
I was a software engineer for 10 years, and there were parts of my job that I liked and parts of my job I did not like. And I was at a company that was sometimes great and sometimes not. And my job was just kind of getting worse and worse. And so
Hmm.
after doing some pattern writing and coming up with the idea for the subscription box that I started thinking like, oh my gosh, could I actually do this? Like, could I quit my job and do this? And for a while I was like, no, that's a crazy pipe dream. Like there's no way. Um,
Right.
but I wound up like really deciding to go for it. And
Yeah.
basically worked on my business as like a full-time job every night, every weekend. My friends hated me. They were like, "What's wrong with you? You have no." I just didn't have a life for about 2 years, but it
Yeah,
worked out. In the end, I was able to quit my job, and now I get to do all this full time, which is fun.
that's fantastic. Yeah. Like as a person who does their business full time, quitting a career, it's like the scariest moment.
Terrifying. It's terrifying.
But I think if you have a vision for it and you can see how
Yeah.
to reach the success that you want to have, it's like you just have to take that leap. And not that it's okay for everybody to do or that everybody has privilege enough to be able to do it, but it's it's so freeing. And like it was funny. I'm gonna say this and then I'm gonna rewind a little bit because I have a question that's like percolating. But my husband was in software development for 8 years, and same thing, like the company was great, and then they like sold it off to like a bigger company, and then it like started getting super corporate, and it was just like a downhill spiral for him. And so it was kind of that similar situation where it was just like like, can we afford to quit our jobs? How can we make this work? Because we're both miserable and
Mhm.
we both have other things that we really want to do and experience. And so yeah, like he jumped ship right after I quit my job. And so
It's hard to even imagine, isn't it? And it's
yeah.
scary. Like I don't know how it works for you, but like in my family, I went straight from college into an engineering role, which, we all know pays pretty well. And my
Hmm.
husband was in a career path that was much slower to grow. And then he also went through a period where he was unemployed trying to find the right fit. So
Hmm.
for most of our marriage, at least early on, I was the main breadwinner. And I just had that was the thing in my brain that I was used to. And then, we had a kid and
Hmm.
he had a better job, but I was still the one making the majority of the money. And so the idea, and like, we used my health insurance, all of that. And so the
Yeah.
idea of like trying to replace that income and quit my job was just so terrifying. It
Hmm.
was so terrifying. Um, but things kept going downhill at work. And then, like, the pandemic happened and I was
Yeah.
working remotely anyways. And it kind of just got to a point where I was like, okay, like I had spent enough time working two jobs and being so exhausted and having no life. And then the pandemic happened. We had no childcare either. So we had a crazy, my son, my first is crazy. He's nuts. He was 2. We had a crazy 2-year-old home while we were both trying to work. And I was doing two jobs. And I think that helped a lot with
Yeah.
I was like, okay, well, this is scary and anxiety inducing to quit my job, but I have to quit something. Like
Right.
I have to quit something before I lose my mind. So I think that definitely helped.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, like that changed that all like the lockdown, everything. It just changed everything in my brain. And I think it was just so like collectively traumatic because everything had to change for everybody.
Yeah.
And whatever way that was, it was like nothing that anybody was actually prepared for. And like my husband and I have talked about it a million times just because we're together all the time. Not all the time. He's like a full-time student now and whatever. I go do my business. But like we just talk about everything and just how actually traumatic it was for both of us. And like it really did spur us to be like, oh my God, life is too short, to be
Yeah.
like, why are we doing the things that make us miserable when we have these other avenues that we know will bring us joy? And like, who cares
Yeah.
if like throw our degrees in the trash? No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, that's kind of what it feels like, right? And it did for a long time too. Like I always, I think so. There was a moment when I remember very clearly, which is funny because I remember like nothing. But I was one moment I remember very clearly when I was taking my son to daycare when he was a baby. And it's funny, when I was like leading up to my maternity leave ending with my first son, thinking about going back to work, I had such a hard time with it. I was like, I don't want to do it. I'm not ready. At the same time, I was also losing my mind being home with a baby all day because that's just really hard. And I
Hmm.
was looking forward to like sitting at my desk in silence for 5 minutes. That part sounded good. But it's just hard. It's hard to go back to work. And I dropped him off one day and he did not care at all. He loved daycare. He was like, see it. He was 5 months old, but he was like, you're boring. Drop me off, please.
Yeah.
So but I was like driving him to daycare one day while I was heading to work. And I was listening to this podcast and I don't even remember what it was, but it was talking about someone who had started a subscription box. And I was thinking, like, it just kind of set off this train in my mind where I was like, you know what? I'm paying all this money for daycare. I'm dropping him off every day. And like, well, it's really nice to have a break, because going to work at that point was a break after, taking care of a baby. I still felt like it just felt so kind of demoralizing because my job was not going well. It's just, I had like 20 different bosses in a year period. It was insane.
Whoa.
It was just nuts. So I wasn't like actually doing anything.
Right.
I was doing stuff, but it would just get tossed in the trash. And I was like, this is going to sound very, I don't know, privileged and dumb, but I'm going to say it anyways and then clarify. I was like, why am I leaving my child at this very expensive place and not getting to spend time with them so I can go do nothing that's pointless? And obviously the answer is because I needed to make money. Like, I needed to pay my bills. So of course, and that's the situation many of us are in all the time. And, but it kind of just started that like process of like, is it actually possible for me to try to change this? Can I do something different? Because like quitting my job and being a stay-at-home mom, that was never an option. It's just not an option for our family. But it was like, maybe if I am going to work and be away from my kids, which by the way, is pretty good. I love my kids and I love spending time with them, but wow.
Yeah. Moms need a break too.
Yeah. And they need to go run around with other kids. They are just not children that we learned from the pandemic. They are not children that do well at home. Anyways, but I was like, if this is how my family is going to work, I would like to be doing something I'm proud of and doing something that actually is fulfilling in some way. And if possible. And most people don't have the opportunity to do that. And I hadn't had the opportunity to do that. And so when I kind of had that brain flash, I was like, I really want to try to do this. Like, is there any way I can make this work? And as we talked about, it involves a lot of thinking, a lot of math, a lot of figuring out if, what you need to be able to produce and if that will work and all of that. And it's hard, but it definitely was kind of a life-changing moment of like, maybe I don't have to live this life.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe I can do something different. And like I said, like, not everyone can do that. I know that's a very difficult thing to be able to do. It was a very difficult thing for me to do, but I was lucky in a lot of ways that, I was able to devote my weekends and evenings after the kid went to bed to work and all of that. So, it's a hard leap to make for sure.
It really is. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to rewind a little bit because the question has been just sitting on my brain. So unbeknownst to you, made some other quilted items or patchwork items in high school. But so from that stage to making quilts for your friends who are having babies and all that, what were the steps you took to learn? Like, did you learn more about the quilting process from, like, did you take classes? Did you just, how did you go from that to, oh, here's a gift for my friends?
That was before the internet. Not real. That was before the internet as we know it today.
Yeah.
That made me feel really old to say.
No, it hurts. It hurts on the inside. Every time I have to say it, I'm like, I'm VHS years old.
We didn't have the internet then. No. To be honest, I really don't remember. It was so long ago. And I think, so I spent a lot of my teenage years, I made that one quilt, maybe a couple other things, but I actually did a lot of costuming and costume work. That's what I was really into then. And that's what I had a ton of fun with. And so I think doing that helped to kind of refine my sewing skills for sure. But a lot of those skills aren't quite as transferable. So I think, gosh, I'm trying to remember like when I even bought my first cutting mat and rotary cutter. I think I'm guessing my shift happened when I made my first Elizabeth Hartman pattern,
Mm,
where I started really doing things in a more quilty way.
mm.
I really don't remember, but knowing that pattern, knowing that pattern, I definitely couldn't have been using scissors. So
No.
my guess is that once I started doing some more complicated things, I bought the things I needed to buy.
Hmm.
I don't think I had any of that in college. I had a sewing machine, but I wasn't really doing quilting stuff in college. So it must have been out just after college, I think, that I started actually investing in things. And I'm guessing what happened, just knowing me, I probably went to Joann's to buy fabric and then was walking around and I was like, what's this pizza cutter thing? Oh, okay, that makes sense. That's a better way to cut than using scissors. And I think I don't really remember, but knowing myself, that's my guess, is that I was browsing the store and just kind of saw all these things and then started looking them up and figuring out like what they were for and
Hmm.
going from there. I didn't take any kind of classes. I don't think I read any books. I mean, I read a lot of books. I don't think I read any quilting books.
Yeah.
Although it's possible I did and I just don't remember. But I'm pretty sure I just kind of piecemeal started picking things up and kind of organically figured it out from there. I think reading my first real pattern probably helped a lot. That's probably when I finally understood what a 1/4 inch seam allowance was and how important it was, because then I
Mm,
wasn't just making up my own stuff. I was actually making something real. So I'm guessing that probably jump started a lot of the more quilt skills that I had to learn.
okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I think, yeah, it's such a specific thing, like making a quilt. So just like winging it all the time. Like, I think if you know the basic construction of a quilt, like, it's got layers and it has to be like stitched together, most people kind of figure it out. But
Mhm.
it's like, I think too, because I had been around sewing with my mom, like I knew certain concepts of like that, yeah, you can put a binding around something, or, I didn't know how to do it. So my first quilt was long armed by my friend Jen, and then it was bound by my friend Beth because I didn't have those skills yet. But
Binding your first quilt is rough.
yep, it sure was. And the stitches are I cut the binding too small on the one I first did by myself. I cut the binding too small and uh finished it by hand. So of course, like the stitches are terrible. Like on all my first quilts that I did the binding on by hand, I'm gonna just go through with a sewing machine, like on my sewing machine, and just like stitch them all down because it's atrocious. But anyway,
Well,
okay.
the first real quilt that I bound it using pre-bought
Mm,
tape from Joann's. And
yeah.
I tried to sew it on by like putting it over the edge and doing it all in one seam. It was
Yeah.
frustrating. I went back and all the spots in the back where it wasn't
Hmm.
where it didn't catch the back of the binding. It was a mess.
Yeah. Like in theory, it sounds so great to do that, but like you said, like you
Not work.
can't see what's going on the backside. So you're
Yeah.
just like, I hope to God that this is catching.
I'm sure there are professionals who can do it. I am not one of them.
Yeah, no, binding is still one of the things that is just, I can do it, but I don't like it.
Yeah.
And
I
I
don't mind it.
will,
I don't mind it so much anymore. Especially since I don't do any quilting anymore. Like I don't do the quilting step anymore.
oh, okay.
And so that for me, usually like when I would quilt something and then I'd have to bind it, it was like, it's just too much. I just can't do one more thing I don't want to do.
Yeah,
And I think that helps a lot now. So now I'll get my quilt back from the long armor and I'm like, okay, I can bind this. It's okay.
right.
The hard part's been done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, I get that too. I like the long arm is my favorite part of the process. So once I get it off the long arm, I'm like, oh, I
Yeah.
don't want to.
Now
I
I
don't
have
want
to
to bind
bind
it.
it. Yeah. That just reminded me, one of the things I did fairly early on, actually. I'm trying to remember exactly when it was, but fairly early on, I went and took a class on a long arm and rented one.
Mm,
I am terrible at it. it was all freehand. Like I didn't do any edge to edge stuff. I'm not good at it. I mean, you have to practice way more than I ever did to be good at it, I think. But
Mhm.
I did do, because I never liked, I had a tiny little machine. I think it's actually, oh, I gave it to my sister. Never mind. It used to be one of them back there. I had a
Mhm.
tiny little machine for a while that had like no throw space, and trying to quilt on it was just impossible. I couldn't do it. Like
Yeah.
maybe a baby quilt, but even a baby quilt was hard. So I went and tried doing a long arm, and like I said, not good at it, but it was really fun. I really enjoyed doing it, and it was so much easier than trying to wrangle it at home
Mhm.
for sure.
Yeah.
So I liked doing that.
Yeah.
But again, not good at it.
Yeah. It does. The free motion
Exactly.
stuff takes so much practice. And
Yeah.
like, I don't ever, I mean, I do sometimes, like, I literally have been working on these two quilts that the client made two of the same exact quilt for
Mhm.
her grandsons. And so I'm like, but it's like all these embroidery, it's called A Day at the Zoo. And it's like all these embroidery animals. And like, she didn't want an edge to edge going across them, which is fair because she put a ton of work into making these adorable zoo animals. And there's like, I was like touching every single one because they all have like different textures of fabric and like the sorry, this is a tangent, but I don't care because it was so cool. The giraffe, like his spots were embroidered over minky. So
Oh,
like the
oh,
fuzzy was like popping through on the white of the body. I was like, this is so crazy. It was so cool. And like, of course, the polar bear was
yeah.
minky, and like the emu was like the like luxe minky that's like really long, the longer
Mhm.
fibers. So it's just like these floofy bodies. I was like, this is the cutest thing ever. But anyway,
But a
so
lot of
yeah,
custom quilting, I'm guessing.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like all free hand, and I'm like, well, I hope she's not mad about this quilt because I
Oh,
mean, I think it looks fine, but I think it's just funny. Like, I'm so used to setting a digital edge to edge or even customizing with digital,
mhm.
but just the nature of these blocks and like, just she's like, I just want kind of like, organic lines and whatever, just to quilt the blocks down. And it's just such a different skill. And I'm like, I have to like stand there. I just like stared at the quilt and I was like, okay, what are we doing? What are we
How
doing, guy?
we gonna do this?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, speak
Yeah.
to me. Tell me what you want. So anyway, it is such a different skill set. But taught I was teaching long arming
Oh,
for
cool.
renters at our local
Okay,
quilt
yeah.
shop for a little while. And so the kind of putting my education degree to to,
Yeah.
to use a little. Um, but it is like funny how much more you learn about quilts when you also long arm them
Mm-hmm.
or
Yeah,
quilt them
that makes
yourself.
sense. Yeah.
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 So I think it's an important step. If you can't quilt it on your domestic, then like, yeah, try to find a local quilt shop where you can take a class and rent it. Like it's to me, the value that you get out of just learning what you learn about quilts and how they're constructed is like so worth it,
Yeah.
especially if you're newer, because I didn't really know much about quilts. Like obviously I knew you cut apart fabric, you sewed it back together, you got a pattern. I knew you quilted it together, but like actually doing it myself, I was like, oh,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
so many more of those like seam allowances and like just the things that you come across when you're building a pattern, like they all made so much more sense. And I think too, a lot of patterns will tell you how to like how much backing to get or how much binding or whatever, or use this much batting, but that's not for long armors. Like
Yeah.
this quilt that's actually hanging on the wall, I bought too little backing
Mhm.
to be loaded on the long arm. So I had to literally like hand sew a strip of fabric to the bottom of the backing while it was on the machine because I was like, I'm
Oh,
not, I was literally at the
not
very bottom.
redoing this.
I was
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm gonna lose my
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, it's kind of
No.
funny, but
I'm very particular about that on my patterns. I always make sure, and I think some people probably get irritated about this, but I'm
Mhm.
always like, I am not going to call for backing that doesn't leave a 4-inch overhang on all edges, because the last thing I want is someone to buy and piece their backing, send it to their long armor, and then be like, oops, that wasn't big enough. So
Mhm.
it's a bit more overage and all of that, but I just, yeah. I,
Yeah.
I I definitely had not that bad of a situation, but I definitely had a situation where I bought backing, pieced it, and like I almost didn't do this, but at the last minute before going to long arm it,
Mhm.
like driving out to the other side of town, I laid it out to make sure,
Yeah.
and it wasn't big enough, so I had to add like a random.
Yeah.
I was like, I guess we're adding a border on the back.
Yeah. Like, oh, I did that
Glad
on
I checked.
purpose.
Glad I had checked because it was
Yeah.
not correct.
Yeah. And it's frustrating for the person, like the topper, to be told like, oh, I can't quilt this because you don't have enough backing.
Yeah.
But it's also frustrating for the long armor if you're having someone else do it. And probably frustrating for you too if you get to the quilt shop, which I've experienced this. People come, they load their backing, and they start putting their top on, and it's wider than the
Yeah.
backing. I'm like, you can't quilt that. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like,
Not
you
gonna work.
don't have
You're
enough
gonna have a
backing.
lot of trimming to do.
Yeah, I'm like, you're gonna lose all like, 10 inches off your quilt top because your backing's not wide enough. They're like, well, I got this much yardage. I'm like, yeah, but then you have to cut that in half and put a seam in it. And they
Yeah.
were like, oh, I'm like, oh, honey.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's
Oops.
so upsetting.
I I had enough. I didn't even used to do this when I first wrote patterns. I would call for the amount of backing, but I wouldn't have instructions for piecing it. And now I do. After I don't even remember what changed, but someone suggested, it might have been my editor. Someone suggested like
Mm,
people really like it when you tell them, especially with queen sizes. Like a lot of times people don't have a hard time thinking through if they need like 2 seams, 3 seams. And so now I just always have that
yeah,
in the
no, I think,
back, like, cut your backing into this size piece, sew it together this way.
mhm,
Final size should be this.
yeah, yeah,
Because
no,
no
and I
one's,
think that's valuable because people don't always know.
yeah. And it's also like you finally made it to the end. Like once you did it, do you really want to have to think through like how to piece I don't know, piecing backing is just annoying.
It is super annoying. I always try to buy extra wide if I
Yep,
can. And if I'm
me
using Minky, I'm like, well, it can't be wider than 90 inches because I'm using 90-inch wide. Like,
too. Yeah. Yeah.
because it's not fun. I hate it so much, but I'll do it if I have to. I had to piece backing for a king size Harry Potter quilt. And I say but I made my mom do it. I was like, I'm finishing putting the border on. Would it be so cool if you put the back together? She pattern matched it and everything because she's an angel. But
Um,
anyway, yeah, it's not a fun part of the process. And it's like so much fabric. So like you've already gone through the long seams of your quilt top, and then you
and
have to
then you
like,
have to do that. And then you have to press it open.
mhm, boring.
It's fun having a mom that also sews and does creative things
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
can't relate.
It's
Yeah.
super fun.
My
And
mom's
that's
like, no.
no,
My
she
mom's uninterested.
she's
Yeah. My mom's like,
skipped a
can
generation.
you fix this sweater for me? That's what she says. She's like, I'm just not creative. And I'm like, you have to, no one's just creative. I don't
Mm-mm.
know. You just have to try something and be really bad at it for a while until one day it makes sense. Like
Yeah.
that's how everything works for me.
Yeah. I think too, like it's a level of curiosity.
Mm.
And unfortunately, for some people, for whatever reason, their curiosity kind of maybe got squashed at some point. And so maybe
Just
they
in a
don't,
different area or something.
yeah, like, so they just put their energy somewhere else. But I think always, because my mom was so crafty and creative all the time, like I've always had that seed in my brain of like, I can make that.
Yeah. Yeah. I always
And
had that too, but I don't know where it came from.
hmm, it's so funny, like how, yeah, because like sometimes it's because it's literally how you were raised, and sometimes it's just,
It's just your brain.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I feel like
My
my,
dad is like that, I guess, in other areas, not in
yeah,
crafty areas, but in other
mhm,
areas. He
yeah,
builds he builds robots and stuff like that.
fun. That's a good
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, my dad's always building stuff with wood or just like, there's always been just like making happening in my house. So,
Mhm. Yeah.
and then also my husband loves to build stuff with
Mhm.
wood. I mean, we have a lot of stuff laying around that I'm like, so what are you gonna do with that now? He's like, I
That
don't
thing you
know.
made. Yeah. He's like, what are you gonna do with all those quilts?
I'm like, I'm gonna be warm. That's what I'm gonna do.
Yeah. I have too many quilts. I'm sure a lot of people can
Um,
feel that.
no,
No,
I
I
still want
don't think
more.
so. Yeah.
No. To me, they're just so practical and like it
Yeah.
doesn't matter what time of year it is. Like I always have a quilt on me if we're just like hanging out. And same with my husband. We have quilts on our bed. We have quilts in our living room. We have quilts in our other like our our main living room is shared space when we have guests because we rent out our master suite as an Airbnb.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And it's called the Cozy Quilt House. So naturally, like five of the quilts live in the room. And
Yeah.
then there's a bunch in the main living room. But then upstairs we have a second bedroom that is like our personal living room for when we have guests. And there's like four quilts up there. And we've got three on our bed. And I've got this one hanging on the wall that rotates out and goes back into the living room. Sometimes it's hanging on the quilt wall in the living room.
I just have giant piles.
I love it. I love having quilts and like it's just like something I never want to not have around. So I just get okay with having a ton.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. I have a lot that are like samples for
Mm.
patterns.
Hmm.
And so like they're still like I should still use them, but a lot of them haven't even been washed yet. And so I'm like, well, what if I want to photograph this one again? Or like, what if a shop wants this one? I better put it away.
Right.
I wind up just having like the same four that are used and the rest are just hiding somewhere, which is silly. And every once in a while I have a few that are like so soft and so like especially ones that are using like the fables and wovens. I love
Mhm.
those. And I have a couple with those that I don't pull out and let the kids use, but sometimes I'll go grab one and like,
Yeah. You're like,
this
this
is
is from
just for me.
mommy.
This is
Yeah.
just for me. No spilling. Like
Yeah. You stay far, far away.
yeah, yeah. This is only mine.
Yeah. Only use it when they're asleep.
Actually, the quilt my son has on his bed almost all the time is this one that I made. Like one of the crappy ones I made early on where I had no idea what I was doing. And made like um oh my gosh, it's so embarrassing. It's cute, but it's made with like a whole bunch of, random fabric from Joann's, which is fine. But I was like, I know how to save some money. I'll buy the $3 a yard white muslin instead of the
Mm-hmm.
quilter's cotton.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I was so smart. I was probably, gosh, maybe, I don't know. I don't think I was even 20. So wait, no, I'm not sure. I was young. It was
Mm-hmm.
one of the first ones that I did when I kind of came back to it.
Yeah.
And I bought polyester batting, the cheapest one they had. And then when I loaded it on the long arm, something weird happened and it shifted while I was quilting it. So there's
Oof.
like a nice diagonal line of batting. You can't really tell, but it's it's
That's the worst.
the cheapest possible flannel I could find. But somehow that quilt, that crappy quilt, is the one that's been on my son's bed for years now. So
You know,
go figure.
that's
Yeah.
yeah, right. You're always like, why
Yeah.
that one?
That one. And it's funny, in the dim light, it looks pretty good. I don't want to look at it in the light of day, but you know,
Just let him keep it on his bed. He can
soft. Yeah.
use it as he wishes.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
It's just funny to me. I'm like, I'm a professional. Go look
Hmm.
at my son's bed.
Yeah. You're like, don't look over
Don't
there,
look at that
but
one.
yeah,
It's not good.
yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay, so back to businessy things. So
Mhm.
you started your subscription box.
Mhm.
When did that start?
That started at the beginning of 2020.
Okay.
And then I had a lot of people who were like, I want to use my stash, but I want to make these projects, or like I live overseas and shipping is ridiculous. And so after a few months, I worked on making a digital version of the membership too. So it became less of just a subscription box and more like a membership, and you could either do a digital version or a subscription box. So that was very challenging. from a technical perspective. I think a lot of people I mean, you probably can relate to this. I think a lot of people probably assume that either I'm a stay-at-home mom and I do this in my free time. Nope,
Mm-hmm.
not true. Or that I spend all day sewing. Also, nope, not true.
No.
I go weeks without even touching my sewing machine. I spend all day in front of my computer doing
Mm-hmm.
logistical, practical stuff. And that was one of those situations where I'm like, well, I'm going to spend the next 3 months in front of my computer. Thank goodness I have a software background, because trying to set up a system that handles both, a community online membership and then also has physical, it was a lot.
Yeah.
It worked out, and that wound up having that like membership. I know people can get irritated with memberships because they're like, I just want this pattern. I don't want to have to join a membership to get this pattern, all of that stuff. I get it. I totally get it. But like, I will say memberships are what make creatives able to keep creating for you. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something people don't quite realize or understand is like, if you want someone to be able to produce work for you, if you want to be able to utilize these different patterns or these different things, like that is one way that lets people keep doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, I would not have been able to quit my job and replace my income solely on just pattern sales.
Yeah.
I would say I am really bad at knowing exact numbers ever because it stresses me out. So I actually pay much less attention than I should with business numbers in general, because like I said, I just get in my head and anxious about it. So I kind of detach. And as long as things are vaguely working how I expect, then I don't worry too much about it.
Yeah.
But like, I would say my like pattern sales alone, just just PDF patterns are probably like 30% of my income.
Mm.
And that's not insubstantial, and it's certainly pretty good. But when I was trying to replace a engineer salary
Right.
and
Yeah.
benefits,
Yeah.
like that alone wouldn't have cut it. I wouldn't have been able to quit my job. So being able to have like a membership and have that regular recurring revenue
Mm-hmm.
that you can count on, and it goes up, it goes down,
Sure.
there's a lot of flux, but knowing roughly that you have something regular is a really like, it's a game changer for
Mm-hmm.
creatives, for anyone running a creative business. So that just made a huge difference for me, and it was wonderful. And I don't know, I haven't said this to anyone else, I don't know how much longer we'll be doing the subscription boxes.
Mm.
I mean, at least through the end of this year,
Yeah.
but it's a lot. There's so much work and there's so much logistics behind that. And oh, good Lord, trying to kick that off while the pandemic was happening and there were supply chain issues. It was,
Mm-hmm.
oh my gosh, I can't even be that shaved years off of my life.
No, I'm sure. I'm sure.
Yeah. Trying to get fabric shipments that were like caught on the other side of the world. Like, it was just, woof,
Yeah.
that was exciting. But it's been that whole, that membership, and the membership itself will like that's going strong, and it'll keep going strong. I might phase out the subscription boxes in the future just
Mm-hmm.
because it's so much work.
Yeah.
And it kind of would free up some time to get to do some other stuff, which I'd love to be able to do.
Yeah.
So, but it's been the whole membership. It's the Modern Makes membership. It's just been great. It's been a lot of fun. I've made some great connections, met some awesome people through it. And it's just so fun to get to put these projects together every month. So
Yeah.
that was a game changer for me for sure.
That's awesome. So I guess what would a membership, if people don't know, like what would the membership entail if they were to
Oh,
join?
yeah, it's so the idea, remember back when I was saying I got this idea when I was taking my son to daycare
Yeah.
about the subscription box. And I was like, there are a million subscription boxes. I mean, there are only a few quilting subscription boxes, but it's like, what would differentiate them? And what I realized is like when he was born, and even before that, when I was pregnant and when I was working and all of that, I realized that I went through such a long dry spell of not doing anything creative
Mm.
for so long, just because of the logistical barrier of trying to like plan a project, buy the stuff for the project, get the, like materials needed, whatever. It was just too much with a baby and a job to like make that happen. And I had kind of wished like that there was something, and I'd even looked it up, So I kind of wish there was something where I could just like get a small project in the mail with everything I needed, so I could just like do it when I had free time. Because you don't have like, most people don't have like 8 hours of free time to sit down and work on something. We have a couple hours. And so I was like, I wish there were little projects I could just get done in a couple hours without having to spend half of that time going to the store or trying to order fabric or whatever. So that was kind of the idea behind it. I also, your show is called Not Your Granny's. I kind of also had that like that feeling. I wanted something that felt very modern, and modern quilting has obviously been around for a long time, but it really had just started becoming, like on Instagram, more widely known, and there weren't a ton of designs out there yet.
Yeah.
And there weren't a ton of designs that were smaller that you could use in your house. So I thought, wouldn't it be fun if we could get like mini projects that could be like tote bags or pillow covers or just wall hangings or like laptop cases, like just something that we can actually use that feels fresh and modern and different, and maybe skills, and could just like show up in your inbox or on your doorstep once a month. Like, wouldn't that be nice? And so that's kind of where it came from. And so basically that's what it is. You get a modern mini project every month that's exclusive to the membership for at least a while. If you get the subscription box, you get a box full of all the materials you need. If you're a digital member, you get the pattern in the mail. There's like a whole library of tutorials from past projects or just cool new skills. You can check out past patterns on the website too. And then usually about quarterly, there's like a full free pattern too, like a full quilt pattern that gets sent out to people too. So that's more or less what it is. It's pretty straightforward, but it's just a lot of fun it's a fun way to build some skills. And it didn't really even start out necessarily as a skill builder, but I always like kind of listening to what people are saying about it and what they like, what they don't like. And that's one thing that I started to notice is people were like, oh, I learned this, like, or this was a great skill builder. Like, I'm really looking to expand my skill set. And especially since so many people started quilting during the pandemic, during 2020, now a lot of those people are like, okay, I'm ready to kind of branch out, try some different things, pick up some new skills. So I try to lean into that more now and like try to pick patterns and projects that have kind of a skill building kind of element to them, especially because it's so much more fun to learn a new skill on a 20 by 20 project than it is on a full-size quilt.
Absolutely. I was just going to say, like, smaller projects that have a new skill are way more approachable than thinking of doing that brand new skill that you've never done before on an entire quilt.
And if it doesn't really turn out exactly how you wanted it, it's not the end of the world. And you can also make another one if you want. Like, I've had people who made one and they're like, nope. And then they made a second one in the same afternoon and they were like, okay, now I get it. So it's a nice way to practice some skills. And again, they're like supposed to be projects that can be done like in an afternoon, not something that has months of work before you have a payoff.
Yeah, which is so nice, because I think you're right. Like, so many quilters, especially like millennial and younger quilters, like, we're busy as fuck. Like, we all have jobs, we all have, and I shouldn't say all because I'm like lumping myself in there, like I have a day job. I mean, I do, but it's not the same as I work for myself. It's fine.
But you still have a limited time to devote to your own projects and your own projects.
But I am, if I'm not on the computer talking to people on Etsy or messaging clients or whatever, like the logistical stuff, I am sewing all day. And so when I come home, I'm like, I don't want to sew. Even though maybe earlier on I was like, okay, I have that like little thing at home, I'm gonna work on it. And even small projects feel crazy when it's like that's all you've done. But I think for me, when I've bought kits or like gotten stuff that's like, okay, I have the pattern, I have all the fabric, all I need to do is just go. Like, that has been such a godsend sometimes, where it's like, I know I want to make something, but I don't want to have to like put so many creative juices into it, because I've done that all day long and I'm like decision fatigue city. Like, my brain is like, I'm not making any more choices right now. And so I love that concept. And I think you're right. Like, it just seems like the quilting that people think about is the granny style, where it's like, old fabrics or just like kind of feels dusty and like, oh, okay, that's cool, but I think we want more from it as a whole community. I think there are movements of kind of going back into the more traditional ways, which is great. And I think keeping them alive is important because there's so much history there that needs to be remembered. But I also think like making room for what the modern quilter is now. Like we're
Mhm.
not all stay at home
Yeah.
moms. Like there's men, there's, children, there's all these different working moms and single dads and all these different kinds of people coming into quilting that
It's not just retired women.
no, it's not just retired women. And even though that's a large part of the demographic of quilters, I think ultimately there's more of us doing it differently or trying to do it differently in a way that suits
Fit it
our
in.
lifestyle. Yeah.
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 So when you find like businesses or people who are trying to make it more practical, it's like, oh my God, thank you so much. It's like such a
That's
sigh of
the
relief.
goal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the goal.
I really love that. And I mean, totally understandable if you have to phase out the boxes because that is a lot, getting all the fabric and making sure everybody has the right cuts and the right amounts.
Yeah.
And
And I do outsource the cutting of it now, which is great. I can't even, I physically can't do it. I can't, it's too hard on my joints, on my wrists and my hands. I just can't cut that much fabric anymore. I mean, I cut the batting every month. I need that alone that's quite enough for me. But just the
Mhm.
fulfillment of the boxes and the
Yeah,
shipping process and everything, it's a lot. I know we'll miss it when we're not doing it anymore. And again, it's not like I'm not stopping it anytime soon,
right.
but it's weird to reach a point where I finally see like I see a future where we aren't doing the boxes anymore, and it's kind of bittersweet.
Yeah, yeah. And I think you've got to do what works as long as it works. And if it just feels like it's not working anymore or it's not bringing as much value as other things that you're doing, then I think as a business, it's important to make those changes and grow because that's how we stay alive. That's how we keep our businesses intact and bringing forth the most, I think, impactful thing we can give. And every business is different. And so whatever you focus on, that's going to be your niche, that's going to be your thing. And then somehow, if there is a gap, it will get filled elsewhere.
Yeah, I certainly have no shortage of things I need to do, and not enough time to do them. So
Yeah.
that said, if you are interested in a subscription box, got the rest of this year, maybe a little bit of next year. We'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. So get in while the getting's good.
Try it out now while it's there.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So it's fun. And like I said, I plan on continuing the Modern Makes membership, forever. It's fun. I love it.
Yeah. That's
But
so cool.
I've talked about this a lot on social media. I actually, one of the main reasons I started a quilting business and actually did start doing pattern writing is because eventually I wanted to become a surface pattern designer.
Mm,
Have an art background. I've always loved art. I would have loved to have been an artist or an illustrator, but I'm also logical and I was like, I'll never be able to support myself. So I went a different direction.
mhm.
Um, just couldn't kill the practical voice in my head. My
Yeah.
actually, it was my dad, my dad's voice. But so I had planned on spending all this time like building surface pattern design portfolios and submitting to fabric companies, and instead my business took off and I spent years writing quilt patterns and running a membership and teaching instead.
Yeah.
But I as we talked about earlier, I'm a fabric designer for Riley Blake now, which is really exciting, and I just really want to be able to like clear a little bit of time in my schedule and space to keep working on that, and devote more time
Yeah.
to art and art licensing. So you're right. It's kind of one of those things where we just always need to be growing and seeing what's working well for us, what's not, where we can find more space to grow in the areas we want to grow and
Yeah.
all of that. It can be kind of uncomfortable and hard to do, but
Mhm.
it's definitely it's definitely the only way to keep moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. That like finding comfort in within the discomfort is kind of where I think as a business owner, you just have to live because when you get comfortable, I think that's when that's when businesses fail because
You just
there's
have to be adapting because things are changing. Your customers are changing. The
yeah.
economy is changing. Everything's always changing. So
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Um, okay, so yeah, you're a surface designer now for Riley Blake. You've got your
Mhm.
first line coming out. So tell me what inspired that and how, like, was like the opportunity brought to you, or did you just feel like this was the direction you wanted to go now that you've kind of done all these other things? Or yeah, like how did that
Well,
come about?
so I had been working on a portfolio for basically years,
Yeah.
a long time. And I took Bonnie Christine's surface pattern immersion class.
Okay.
I took it, I actually took it twice. I took it 1 year and then took it again a couple years later, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, because I took it right before the pandemic.
Mm.
And so everything changed, right? And like
Mhm.
suddenly no daycare. I had to kind of put that on the back burner. And then I took it again, I think the following year, because she offered some kind of really awesome discount to like people who had taken it before, and she had re-recorded a bunch of stuff. And I was like, well, I'll do the updated class. So I took it again. That class is like unbelievable. It's amazing. There is no way I would have gotten my portfolio finished ever any of this if it wasn't for that class, because it just, like you can figure stuff out yourself, but it takes so long. And
Mhm.
being able to just be told, like, this is what companies expect, this is how to produce the work,
Mhm.
this is how to do it. Having that roadmap was just life changing. So like I love it so much. It is the only I am very weird about like affiliate stuff and
Mhm.
like shilling for other people or having other people shill for me. It makes me kind of uncomfortable. So I don't really do it. I don't have affiliates for my products. I'm not an affiliate for other people except for that. That is the only thing that I'm willing to be an affiliate for, because I will tell everyone how much I love it, because it made a huge difference for me. So I took that class, and I still was really slow to put my portfolio together just because I had so much work to do. I always feel behind in my job because, I always thought like once I work for myself, I can control how much I sign up for, but that turned out to be not a benefit.
Yeah.
That's a con, not a pro.
Yeah.
What I learned is Amber is not good at judging her own time. So I basically I would work on it a bit here and there, but I never really devoted as much time as I needed to like really put together a good portfolio. And then I finally, my friend Fran from Cotton and Joy, she's wonderful.
I
She
love
started
Fran.
working with Riley Blake, and I was
Mhm.
like, oh, okay, so you need to tell me your thoughts, make me do this, help me. And she was like, what are you doing? Submit your portfolio. So she kind of helped both as a cheerleader and gave me some tough love. And then I got to meet some people from Riley Blake at QuiltCon last year, which was wonderful. And Fran was like, she's going to submit her portfolio. And I was like, okay, I guess I need to finish.
You're like, oh, I am?
That
Okay.
gave me a kick in the pants. So and when I had been getting close. So when I got home from QuiltCon last year, I brought COVID home, so I was really sick for a while. But then
Oh, no.
as soon as that was better, I really kind of made it happen and sat down and finished it up and sent it out to a couple different companies and wound up going with Riley Blake because I really liked meeting them and talking to them. And I really like the people there. They're really awesome.
Yeah.
So that's how that happened. And the first collection will be out in the fall. It's when I'm not working or taking care of screaming kids, we spend a lot of time outside. When we bought our house, we bought it. One of the main reasons we bought it was because it was one of the only ones we could find in our area that had a decent sized yard. It's like
Mm.
a third of an acre, so it's not huge, but it's good sized.
Yeah.
And we do a lot of gardening. We do a lot of stuff in our yard. It was basically empty when we bought the house, and so we've done a lot of work on it.
Mhm.
And I got a greenhouse for myself a couple of years ago, and have a gigantic garden area. So we spent a lot of time gardening, a lot of time out there. And the collection was kind of inspired by how I start feeling actually around this time of year where it's like still cold and wet and gross outside, but I'm starting to kind of like get the itch to get back outside. And I'm thinking about like early summer and everything that comes with that, and all of that. So it's called Garden Dreams. I should have said that.
Perfect.
So yeah.
That's, I mean,
So that's
that
the
fits.
first one. That's the first coming out, and I'm excited about it. It felt very surreal when that contract was finally signed because it had been something I had dreamed about doing for so long. In fact, more than 10 years ago, I bought a book or got one from the library. I don't remember, a book about surface pattern design and started doing it and manually did it, like manually drew out patterns and stuff like that. And it was really fun, but like, man, so much harder, so much more work. So when I finally took Bonnie's class, I was like, oh, thank God.
Yeah.
This is so much better.
Yeah.
It's still hard. Like it still takes a lot of work to do it, but it's just a much more fun process. I feel like it's kind of like designing quilt patterns. You can do it on graph paper, you can do it on paper, but man, once you do it in a software tool on your laptop and you can like undo, move things around, fiddle around, it just changes so much the options you have and what you can put together.
Yeah. Because sometimes sketching is like you can't quite get it right, or like the proportions are off somehow and you're just like, I don't, why is it like this? But if you can like throw it in to some software and it can build all the proper measurements in for you, proportions, then it's like, oh, right. Okay. It's not that hard, but it is at the same time. Lots of math, lots and lots of math. That's so exciting and so cool. Like I love Fran. She's been on the show and I got to meet her in person because I have a ton of family up where she lives. And so we were at interviewing the owners of the quilt shop up there where she was doing a trunk show when her first
quilting bee.
Yeah, the quilting bee.
Yeah.
So when her first line was being released, she had a trunk show for it with her patterns made in all the different prints. And I was just like, they're like, come meet, you don't know Fran? You've never met? I'm like, no. They're like, come meet Fran. And so they introduced us, and the show was still pretty new, but I reached out to her and we made it work, and like just enjoyed following her. But like she has really seemed to enjoy designing with Riley Blake and having that opportunity. And so it's cool to kind of see like the community that we create in the quilty world. Like there's so many pockets of people that like you can find that are gonna think the same way as you, or at least similar, or be there to push you to do the things that you're scared to do and be your cheerleader. And I think ultimately the overall feeling is that we want each other to succeed. So it's like, it doesn't feel like harshly competitive, like, oh no, someone else has a quilty podcast, well, I need to like do all these things and like get better at it and be better than them. It's like, no, I'm like back here cheering them on because it's like we're all just trying to elevate each other. And so that's
I feel like I was really lucky when I kind of joined the community, because I pretty quickly got into contact or like got to meet, I don't even remember how, I think I just reached out like a couple people that I felt like were like really way beyond me, right? And they were just so kind and so nice and so like eager to help and like tell me things, like there was no competitiveness. There was no like, oh, that's my thing. I mean, like, so Elizabeth from Quilter's Candy, I teach a pattern writing class. She teaches a pattern writing class. That's actually a different funny story. But when I first was thinking about doing my subscription box, I was actually participating in a quilt along that she was running, and I won a different subscription box, like from someone else. That actually, I think Bonnie's mom, Bonnie from Surface Pattern Design, her mom runs a quilt shop, and she had a subscription box for a little while, and I won her subscription. It's all everywhere. It's a connected little spider web. And so I had reached out to Elizabeth and I was like, oh, thank you so much. I'm really excited. I was actually just thinking about starting a subscription box, and I know you used to run one. So if you have any tips for me, let me know. And she was like, oh, I'm happy to talk to you about that. We started having like long conversations about subscription boxes and just the industry in general. And she was so willing and open to share everything. Maybe she was even still running hers at that point. I can't quite remember, but basically she was running a membership. I was looking at running a competing membership, and she was like, that sounds like a great idea. That sounds really unique. Let's talk about it. I'll tell you what I know. And I just kind of blew my mind. And then, of course, down the line, one day we were talking, and I was like, or I don't even remember which of us said it first, but we basically discovered we were both working on creating pattern writing courses. And we were like, oh, of course, because when one of us does something, the other one does something.
Right.
But it was fun. Like it's fine, because I guess I've just always had the feeling from the beginning, like in this industry, a rising tide lifts all boats. And I feel really lucky that when I entered the industry, that was the vibe that people above me had and were able to pass down to me. And I think that really helped shape how I was able to approach the industry as well. And I have just found so much more value in collaborating with people. And I've gotten so much out of collaborations with people. And I've just found that like looking at any of it as a competition is just really detrimental. Like, of course, there is a practical level of there are this many customers in the industry and they get divided, like I get that. But I mean, it's just so mutually beneficial to approach it more as a collaborative industry than a competitive one.
Yeah.
And it's just, I've just found so much personal value, both like personally and for my business.
Yeah.
Approaching things that way. And I had people ask me when I started teaching, like, why would you be teaching like, why are you training up your competition? Like, why you're a pattern designer, you make money releasing patterns, so why are you now teaching other people to release patterns?
Right.
And that just kind of felt like a no-brainer to me, I guess. Like I had so many people that would reach out to me and ask questions about pattern writing early on anyways, and I was always like, I'm always happy to answer. That was the attitude that was given to me, so of course I would pass that on to other people. And it seemed like there were so many people who wanted to learn more about that. And like the quilting industry is massive. Like we see a lot of pattern releases now because we're all on Instagram and we're all watching them, but there have always been a lot of quilt patterns out there. And I think that's that makes it a wonderful, vibrant ecosystem. We have a lot of options to choose from. And I don't like the idea that someone would have amazing ideas and not get to release them because they don't have the technical skill set to do so. Right. Like that. So I always thought that teaching other pattern designers sounded awesome.
Yeah.
Like I want to see what they want to make. I want to see what they make. My students make the coolest things. I want to see that out in the world. And I feel like that's just been great. I've enjoyed doing that so much.
Yeah. And it's so cool. And like I said, like the quilters that I've interviewed that have taken your course have nothing but amazing things to say about it and how well thought out it is and how well prepared they felt to embark on their own pattern writing adventure, having all that stuff to draw from. And I think you're right. Creativity begets more creativity. There's not a finite number of ideas or iterations of ideas out there. It's like we can put an infinite number of twists on things. And so I think the more people who are putting ideas out there, the more it fuels other ideas and gives people space to try new things and see things that speak to them versus like, well, I guess I'll just buy this pattern because this is the newest, latest thing. It's like, no, we're not. Like, I think especially like us, like millennial women coming into it, we have had to learn how to straddle two different worlds of like watching like the more traditional living situation of like dad goes to work, mom stays home with the kids or does like very part-time work and is home with the kids while also being socialized to be independent and be a boss babe and like all this other stuff that's just like fucking exhausting. And so we've had to kind of carve our own path to figure stuff out. And like as much as we and I guess I can really only speak for myself. Like as much as I wanted that like career path, I went to college, I did all the things. It just ultimately ended up not being the thing for me. But I've always in the back of my head wanted to have my own business. And so I think college and getting my master's degree, there's like a level of confidence that came from all that that allowed me to step into business and do things the way that I want to do them. But I think also having something or some support is really nice too. It's like when I reach out, again, just like you're saying, when I've reached out to people who I kind of feel like are above me or have more expertise or knowledge than me and ask questions, it's like so helpful. It's like there's such a strong community. And I think more than anything, quilters want people to love and understand and keep quilting. Like, if knowing the answer to that question is going to keep you on your path of making and creating beautiful things to put out into the world, then hell yeah, I'm going to answer your question. Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm never going to shy away from talking to people who want to talk to me about quilting. And I'll share what I know. And obviously, I'm not the end all be all. I do it professionally for my business, for my job, but I know that also there's a lot more things I need to learn. And so I think as long as we come at it from that humble spot of like, here's something I'm really good at, so I'm going to show you how I do this, but then run wild, do what you got to do. Like, this is just a stepping stone in your journey. So use it how you will.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it's just, it's just a wonderful community. And I think that there's been such a wonderful push in the last few years to make sure people are included,
Mm-hmm.
to bring in more diverse quilters and give them opportunities that they should have. And to really just make sure that, we limit the amount of gatekeeping that's going on. And to me, like, every once in a while, there are conversations that float around of like, do we need new pattern designers? Like, why are we, everyone's trying to design patterns now or things like that and complaining
Mm-hmm.
about it. And it kind of just like, okay, I mean, maybe you're following too many pattern designers.
Right?
Do you feel that way? But really, at the end of the day, like, my job isn't to gatekeep people, and it's not your job either.
No.
If someone wants to learn how to do this, they should get to learn how to do it.
Right.
And I think that you're right that I have really enjoyed seeing the diversity of work that can come out. And sure, there are going to be patterns that are released that look like other patterns. That
Mm-hmm.
happens. It's part of life,
Yeah. Yeah.
you figure it out, you move on.
Right.
But I have just been amazed at the level of like newness and interest in the patterns I've seen in the last couple of years. There are some that have just like come out that just blow my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like, where I've seen like in my class, this happens every year. People will post like design ideas in our Facebook group, and I'm just
Mm-hmm.
like, oh God, like unbelievable. Like, I never would have even thought of doing something like that. And I just love seeing that. I love the amount of like diversity in design and design styles that people have. And I
Yeah.
feel like I've been seeing more and more of that in the last couple of years. I think people have like, they've, for a while they were kind of moving on from traditional blocks or moving into modern traditionalism and then kind of exploring what you can do in modern quilting. And I just feel like in the last couple of years, people have been really taking that and running with it.
Mm-hmm.
And like really pushing the boundaries in a really good way.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like I've seen these designs and been like, good Lord, I certainly don't want to be the one standing in the way of that. I will help you however I can, like in whatever
Yeah.
way I can, because that should be seen.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just wonderful to see what people can come up with and the
Mm-hmm.
creativity that people have. And then like being able to come up with a design like that and then wanting to share that with other people so other people can make it too. I think it's just
Mm-hmm.
such a special process.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a magic that happens in like creating something, but then releasing it into the world, because then at that point, it's kind of not yours anymore. Like it
Yeah.
gets to take on a life of whatever the makers that, that make your pattern.
Yeah. And being able
Or
to enable other people to be creative is really
exactly.
what it comes down to. And it's so fun.
Yeah. It's like that idea now gets to live its own kind of beautiful life out in the world. And
Mhm.
the fact that it was like living in someone's head is like, what? Like, yeah, and I'm like you, I see patterns come out. I'm like, how did you even think of that? Like, how did your brain see that and go, ooh, I can make a quilt out of that? Like, my mom does it, so I know that it's a thing that happens. My mom's like, I can make that into a quilt, and she'll just do it. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm gonna follow a pattern, but that's fine. Um, so yeah, like I have so much respect for people who are putting their designs out there and inspiring people to make more things and to make more art and put more beauty out there. Because I think just the creative process alone is exciting, but then also being able to share it is so fun. And I think, just like with any social media thing, there's the good and there's some bad that can come with it. But I think for the most part, at least, we have some control over who sees what we put out or how we interact with people. And so I think also having boundaries of saying, like, I will not allow negative talk about what I just put out, or if it is valid, like trying to understand your role in it. But a lot of times it's just people being jealous or being scared of the unknown. And so, and if you can like step back and realize like any negative comments are like 99% of the time that person reflecting or projecting their own inner thoughts onto you, then like it's so much easier to kind of deal
Yeah.
with that. You still don't want to hear it. I never want to hear it. I'm like, don't tell me I'm doing a bad job. Like, I'll figure it out eventually. I don't need to hear it from you. But
My kids say that right now. I don't know where they picked it up, but when they're like, if they're mad about something or they don't want us to say it, stop doing it, they'll be like, "Don't tell me, don't tell me." So that's gonna be my thought now. Anytime I see something on the internet I don't like, don't
yeah,
tell me.
don't tell me. Well, you have so much exciting stuff. You've had your pattern design course out and it's about to start again really soon. And is it the same time, like kind of mid-February every year when you start it?
Yeah, it usually is kind of around January, February, March timeframe. Usually registration opens early February, and it kind of depends on the year because I
Okay.
always have to look at my schedule and
Right.
what's coming up and when it can fit in. Because I like to make sure that like when the course is running, that's my primary focus.
Hmm.
I don't like I try really hard to not have like, a bunch of things going on at once that are pulling focus from that. So I want to make sure I can devote a lot of time to it. And so I make sure to plan it accordingly.
Perfect. And oh, I just have one more question about it. So is it like asynchronous where you release like videos and stuff and people can kind of watch it at their own pace through the 7 weeks?
Yeah, so it's a
Okay.
7 week process, but there's only the only live component of it is like a weekly Q&A session, and that's recorded because I mean
Okay.
we always have students from all over the country. So like
Yeah.
I try to make it as accessible depending on where you are or what your lifestyle is. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
people are working, people are taking care of kids, people are going to school. There's so
Hmm.
much going on in everyone's life. So you can really take the content and the course at any point. And I also have plenty of people that aren't able to follow the 7 week schedule. And that's fine too, because once you sign up for it, you have access to it,
You have access.
basically.
Okay.
I used to say forever, and I mean forever, but also like, let's be honest, is it still going to be up when I'm 80? Probably not. So
Right.
indefinitely, forever-ish.
Yeah.
You don't like
Until
lose
further notice.
access after 7 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay. Well, that's good to know. So that's exciting. Yeah, because I literally saw that like, oh, it starts February 18th. And I was like, "Ugh, but people are going to be at QuiltCon." And I was like, oh, she probably does it like pre-recorded stuff. Like,
yeah, and that timing is kind of like, oops, but it is very much people can take the class anytime. And the first week is like the first week eases you in. So
sure, sure, for sure. Well, that's cool. So, and we'll look for your new line of fabric, Garden Dreams, coming out with Riley Blake in the fall.
tell your local quilt shops that you want it.
It'll be so exciting to see it on the shelves too.
That's gonna weird me out in a good way.
Yeah,
That'd be fun.
like surreal moments. But
Yeah,
uh,
definitely.
well, so exciting. And then you've got your maker membership and for now subscription boxes. So lots of things for people to engage with you on, which is exciting. So how can how can people find you online if they're not aware?
Yeah, so on Instagram, I'm just Alderwood Studio, all one word. And my website is alderwood-studio.com. There's a little dash in there. Someone
Okay.
has the Alderwood Studio domain and they are not letting go of it. They don't have anything on there, but it is not available.
Interesting. Maybe we need to start doing some sleuthing and figure out.
No, I'm like, can I just send you an email? Are you actually going to use this?
Yeah. Like, can I
Um,
please have it?
yeah. Anyways, so
Perfect. Okay.
everything can be found there. Basically, that's kind of the landing spot for all my patterns, classes. I have some like little technique classes and stuff like that too. And
Perfect.
membership can be found from there too. So yeah, that's a good landing zone.
Okay. Well, I will put those links in the show notes below so people can find it easily. They don't have to try to remember or try to spell it because spelling's not everybody's strong
Hard.
suit.
Yeah.
Yeah. But well, thank you again so much for joining me today. And I'm so glad we finally got to sit down and talk and that I got over my nervousness because I really was like, for months, I was like, should I email? No, I'm not going to email. Should I? Yeah, okay, I should ask her. No, I'm not going to.
Anyone can email me. And if I don't reply, it's not because I didn't mean to reply, it's because I got distracted and my inbox is very busy.
That's
So
me too. I'm like,
I
I
always, yeah, like I always want to hear from people. And then if I find an email that I missed like 2 months ago, I feel so bad. I'm like, I'm so sorry.
I know. I'm the same. I like reply to people in my head.
Yeah,
Let me
yeah.
go back. I'm like, oh, I didn't actually send them anything.
Yep,
Okay.
yep, yep. Or it's like in my drafts folder.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I'm like, oh, I should click send on that. That's cool.
sorry.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you again. And I look forward to all your future things and seeing what you do from here.
Thank you. Thanks for
Thanks.
having me.
Of course.